What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We finally have some F1 22 gameplay. Big thank you to EA and Codemasters for giving me this opportunity. This is going to be gameplay around the Miami circuit, which is happening this weekend coming up. And this video is very much going to be to the point, giving you as much information, not just about Miami, but in general about the game, as I take you through a hot lap through the Miami circuit, which is actually not a bad track to drive. I was a bit skeptical. I was thinking maybe this is going to be the new Hanoi circuit. Maybe it's going to be the new Russia, the next car park track. But once I got into the groove with the short amount of time that I've played this game, it was enjoyable to drive. So what's new about F1 22? Well, for starters, crossplay has been announced. It will not be at launch. Do not expect it at game launch. This could be somewhere between weeks and months after the game is released. From what Lee Mather has said, it is understood that Xbox, PlayStation, and PC players should be able to play with each other online, so watch out for the prospects of league racing taking place as tiers rather than being segmented into platforms now, and this should increase the amount of players and lobbies significantly, improving the longevity of this game. While I'm driving, I might mention that this sector of the track is actually my favorite, even though it looks like the most complicated Mickey Mouse part of the track, bit clumsy going over the curves, but once you get into the groove of it and hit the curves in the right place, I actually find this track pretty enjoyable. The handling model has changed significantly, which is to be expected with the new regulations, but the information is quite similar, being sent through the steering wheel as previous generations of this game. The car in general is very rear limited and can spin out even in 4th and 5th gear without the use of any assists. This was the fastest time I managed to set, mixing it with some of the esports drivers, so I was pretty happy about that. And another huge difference for setups this year is that you are able to change the front and rear wing aero settings between 1 and 50 instead of 1 and 11 as last year. Here's all the cars currently available with their liveries. There's also the multiplayer car, and please note that these car models are baseline models and they will be updated to match their real life counterparts before the game launch. So I chose a sprint mode weekend. There's also immersive and broadcast options for pit stops, safety cars, and formation laps. There's also manual turn-in now for pit stops and also manual grid formations. You can also switch your main commentator from Crofty to Alex Jakes. I don't know if they're going to add more, but I do know that Natalie Pinkham, Jacques Villeneuve, Jean-Eric Verne, and also Sacharouz will make an appearance in this game according to Lee Mather. The gameplay is also sped up behind me as I did want to maximize the amount of gameplay that I can show, and the important parts are on the track, of course. But something you're going to see very shortly is that Jeff is gone and we have a new engineer in the form of Mark Priestley. And if you were wondering if there was going to be a breaking point story mode this game, unfortunately that won't be returning this year at least. Another juicy piece of news is Lee Mather hinted at older tracks being added to the F1 game that aren't a part of the current F1 calendar, so maybe the likes of Portimao or China, or maybe even another track like Turkey. As you can see, once again, you can adjust the front wing and rear wing aero to 1 to 50, and also I just decided to show the OSD customization options so you guys can pause that there and take all that information in, because there's quite a bit. But we're going to start the formation lap and we'll get the first words from Mark Priestley as our engineer. And also I noticed on the formation laps it was hard to get temperature into the tires.
Okay, so let's go through all the gears if you can. We need to make sure the engagement is okay before the start. We're going to want to put some temperature into the tyres and brakes. We need to keep the engine cool though, so don't go too high with the revs.
So along with the new engineer, I do think that there might be bits of new dialogue, and what you're going to notice on the screen right now is that there is a manual grid formation, and this will point you in the direction of where your grid slot is. There is also a marker that hovers over your grid slot, which I've turned off for this gameplay, but that marker will help you pull up to the right box and make sure you do not overshoot the mark. I got this one correct, but so far it's been harder than it looks to pull up to the slot in the right amount of time or in the right position. And 5 lights and away we go for the Miami sprint race. And as you can see, there is a fair amount of, I guess, aggressiveness of the AI going into turn 1. Everyone is very much all over the place hunting positions, and that's what you're going to notice from this game. The AI are a lot more aggressive. You know, they got a lot more racecraft. They'll go for moves that weren't to be expected in F1 2021, and that's what you're going to have to get used to. You have to look in all directions. You got to make sure that you don't get dive bombed when you're trying to attack someone yourself. So we're still in P20, and I just didn't want to make any moves right away because the AI can be a fair amount aggressive at this point in time. It can change once again before the game is released, but I think it's to be expected that you'll be racing this year's AI a lot harder than last year's game. Coming out to the back of Norris with the use of ERS and overtake mode, and Norris is actually going to follow us through and make a dive bomb of his own, and luckily we don't crash into our teammate or make contact with any other car for that matter. This right-hander is pretty low grip, and you hug the inside wall in the next corner. I had my teammate on the outside, so I didn't really push him that hard and left him the space. We got Joe in front of us. The AI seemed to always get a lot better of an exit coming out of this hairpin onto the longer straight, which is actually a bit frustrating. Maybe that's something I need to fix in my own driving style or the racing line I take through the chicane. The AI seem pretty weak entering the chicane under the bridge, but they're very strong coming out of it. Like I said, the handling is very rear limited, especially coming out of corners. Very low grip on the rear tires, and something you're going to have to get used to with getting on throttle. The default setup is pretty stable, but that is because they're running a very stiff front suspension. I think it's like 10 on front suspension and 10 on front anti-roll bar, meaning that it's going to provide the most turn-in and also the most stability for the rear end when you're coming out of the corner and entering it because of the roll bar. So if that's the default setup, you could definitely say the car is rear limited, and also the car is a bit understeery. It's a bit heavier, a little bit less responsive in slow speed corners, but in high speed corners it feels pretty much thereabouts. I was running on low downforce settings for these races, and that is because I wanted to keep up with the AI, and you gain a lot of time by having a low drag setup on the straights for this track in particular. Here's a few new cutscenes. Perez is jumping on his team, which is cool to see, some new additions to the game, and you'll also see the new point system for the sprint in this menu when you finish the race for the results as well. And you'll also see on the left hand side that there is an option to save full race replay, and you have an option to do that for both the sprint race and the actual Grand Prix race. For sprint races, you can have them at any track you'd like. Of course, there isn't traditionally a sprint race at Miami, so therefore you can mix it up a bit, or you can use the authentic setting, which means it'll follow the real life calendar and only have sprint races at the real life events. You'll see I get this grid formation wrong, and it will teleport me onto the grid slot instead of letting me place my own car defensively or aggressively. But it's 5 lights and away we go for the actual Grand Prix race here in Miami. As you can see, the AI once again getting a bit feisty going into turn 1, and we're going to go up the inside, try and make up as many positions as possible. We started in P15 because that's where we finished in the sprint race, so we're going to try and get up into the points if possible for this actual Grand Prix race, which goes for 15 laps. The sprint race only went for 5 laps, which is to be expected as it was a shorter race distance setting. And we're going to slip up the inside of Latifi and hang on to the back of Schumacher as we go through this, not a long straight, but it's a flat out part of the circuit where DRS is enabled, and we go up the inside. Not the only person who goes up the inside of Schumacher there. Norris tries to come along with us, and he cut a bit of the corner there. So Norris very much eager to battle, and it's very slow always going through the chicane on the first couple of laps, as it's like parking the bus and you can only go as fast as the car in front of you. And Norris actually makes the move through that chicane.
Okay, there's been an incident on track resulting in loose debris. Fortunately, the marshals have managed to clear it up in time, and there are so far no plans for a safety car.
But we're not done there. We're going to go back up the inside of Norris, who's going defensive into this very heavy braking zone. Probably the best opportunity to overtake at this circuit. And I assume that in real life, that's where most of the overtaking on track will take place. But we're going to come into the pits now. Engage the pit limiter. I actually just going to stop before the line. Make sure we don't speed going into the pit lane. And this is where, this is my first experience with the turn-in, and I got it wrong. So if you get it wrong, you'll be penalized with a slower pit stop with the turn-in. If you get it right, you'll have a quicker pit stop between those two time ranges. Currently for me, it's assigned to button 3, so I just press a button, but I think you can change that to actual steering wheel input. All over the back of Bottas now. It's lap 14 out of 15. We're coming towards the end of the race.
Caution, caution.
And you can see Bottas actually makes a mistake, and we get the position from that error as he locks up his brakes, and also the AI can make errors in the pit stops as well for slower pit stops. Perez wins the race. We got some more cutscenes as you can see on the screen, and I still have so much more information to go through that I will cover in later videos, such as the supercars, the updated damage model where you can damage parts of the front of the Venturi tunnels and also wheelets that go over the wheel. There's a new multiplayer lobby, F1 Live and VR. There's 4 new customization paints such as metallic, matte, glossy, and there's a whole bunch more to go through. So if you want to keep up to date with all the latest information, be sure to subscribe, leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and also be sure to leave a comment if you have any questions you want me to answer in the next videos. Here's the final results of the race. You can change between the sprint and the Grand Prix and the overall. And as always, thanks for watching.